Welcome all to another episode of Politicking as usual, where we cover the political spectrum from A to Z. It's your host, Sean Mars Marshall, aka Marlon Beardo, the Bearded Weirdo. And of course, I'm here. We might as well make this guy the regular co-host. He is a political analyst at Stream. He is an author. He is a creator, fiction and nonfiction, fashion. There's so many levels that this gentleman does, and he's one of my good friends and hell honored guests, the one, the only, Cameron Cohen. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing well. I hope I live up to the intro.
You always do. You always do. So
Oh,
before
thank you.
we even get to picking that big, beautiful brain of yours, we got to make sure we plug and let the people know some of the amazing things that you got going on. So first, of course, we have the Cameron Journal podcast. We have some books. Let the people know a little bit about what you got going on, and I'm going to go ahead and put your
Yeah,
stuff.
so to find me everywhere, head over to CameronJournal.com. And I just started a new Discord community for the Cameron Journal. So the link for that is right at the top of the site. Look for the little Discord symbol. We're very excited about that. um and getting more interaction and people posting and talking about stuff. There's also a live feed of everything that goes in the Cameron Journal, so it's very easy if you love a Discord situation. And then TikTok, YouTube, all the favorite places, it's either at Cameron Cowan or at Cameron Journal. So if you know my name and you know the name of the website, you can find me everywhere. And we have all sorts of stuff on market trends, futurism, life, culture, the economy, politics. The world is hard. This is not. And I try to break it down for you in an easy to understand way that makes sense to people. So it's very exciting.
Nobody does it better. He makes even a dum like me completely aware of what's going on in the nation and all over the world. So if a Mars can do it, anybody can do it. Please go on over there, give them a follow, and please check out some of the content. It's completely phenomenal. And once again, I appreciate you for gracing our stage. So last time we were here, the last special was right after the first debate. God knows things have changed. Might as well toss that episode right in the dumpster because none of it is completely relevant anymore. At the time, we contemplated him potentially dropping out. And when I say him, obviously Joe Biden's what we're talking about. And, we thought, no, there's no way it could happen, but there's a possibility. Well, we're back. We thought we would be back in September, but we had to come back a bit earlier because things have completely changed, yet stayed exactly the same. So, just in context, Cam, let me ask you from a historical perspective, have we seen anything like this before?
No. In my monthly newsletter, I compared the closest election I could find that was somewhat similar was the election of 1824. Which, if you're not aware of the election of 1824, I don't blame you. It was a three-way electoral college tie. Now, remember, in 1824, there were only 20, not even 20 states, 15, 16, not very many. You only had most of the Louisiana Purchase was still territories. So you only had a handful of states. And beyond the original 13, I don't even think Florida had been acquired yet. And you had this three-way electoral college tie, and it went to the House. I've said this on TikTok, and I've done a lot of TikTok videos as this situation has developed. And I would say between July 21st, well, June 27th and August 23rd are probably the most consequential 8 weeks, 9 weeks in presidential election history. I said on TikTok, and people were not happy when I said this, flat out, you cannot swap out presidential candidates this close to an election and win. Can't do it. I said, this is over. The election is done. Trump will win. You cannot swap out presidential candidates this close. not in modern politics, not even in 19th century politics, could you have done this and gotten away with it. The polls would say that I'm wrong. I am cautiously optimistic. I think it's very important to remember it seems like she has a cultural takeover. But let's consider Joe Biden drops out on July 21st. She accepts the nomination on August 23rd. That's 32 days. That's nothing. In elections that take a year. That's nothing. Like, that's nothing. My main problem, my main concern is that eventually the right-wing media will be testing out narratives to see what sticks and see what gets traction, and their attacks on her have gotten ever more caustic, and the usual suspects are already digging in. Eventually Trump's going to find a way to come after her somehow. He will eventually figure it out, and when that happens, and here's the problem, is Joe Biden was very brilliant. I happen to know that the candidate swap was not as impromptu as it seemed. We'll say that. But he did it right after they'd spent a whole week campaigning against him and all this type of thing. And he basically stole their post-convention bump. Trump polls did not increase after the RNC. You usually get a 3 or 4 point bump after the RNC. Trump didn't get any. And so he did it kind of at that right, perfect moment, and also prevented the DNC from completely bypassing Kamala Harris, which, by the way, was the plan. Pelosi and Obama were going to have an open convention, and I guarantee you no one was going to seriously consider Kamala Harris. Joe Biden basically made sure they couldn't get rid of her, because that really was the plan. That's one of the reasons why Obama took 10 days to finally endorse her, is he was holding out for an open convention idea where someone else, Gavin Newsom of California, anybody else, could be given the nomination. Joe Biden very brilliantly out-negotiates both Trump and the DNC at the same time, and basically makes sure Kamala Harris gets the nomination. That's all fine and well, and that's all great. The problem is the right-wing media is going to be testing out narratives. They're going to start attacking her. All of this is going to happen as people are going to vote. You can start voting in Pennsylvania in 10 days. Early voting in swing states like Georgia and Arizona starts in early October. So we're basically just lost 6 months of campaigning on the Democrat side for this candidate swap. They picked a VP that has no national profile. No one knows who the hell Tim Walz is, which sometimes that can benefit you, because when they don't know who you are, voters can project anything onto you and think that it's real because they don't know you. Kamala Harris people forget, literally no one knew what she was doing until about earlier this year, 6-8 months ago. People 2 years ago were like, we have the first Black woman vice president, not that you'd know, this woman's never around, where is she? They're on social media, there'd be, where's Kamala? We elected her, a woman, for vice president, and she's nowhere to be found. And then earlier this year, she's managed to figure out how to be vice presidential and is figured out to be presidential. The DNC speech was really good, sort of thing. But I worry that the toxic spew out of the right-wing media is going to hit as everyone's going to vote. And for better or for worse, that might be just the edge that Trump needs. And I've said this over and over again. Nobody wants to hear it. I've gotten a huge argument with a friend of mine who's like, oh, Alan Lichtman, who's the professor with the 13 keys that predicts presidential elections. He's very famous for this. Is like, no, we have all the keys. Harris can't lose. And I said, for the bulk of the time Harris has been vice president, people haven't liked her. Her approval ratings were lower than Joe Biden's, which were already low. And nobody knew what the hell she did. Or where was she half the time. And then all of a sudden, She comes out swinging, and then all of a sudden she's the nominee, and all of this, feminine phenomenon, pop culture, brat summer, blah blah blah, happened in 32 days. I'm sorry, that doesn't make a presidential campaign in this environment. It just doesn't. And personally speaking, I think people were afraid Joe Biden was too old and bumbling. The debate seemed to prove everybody right. We had this conversation at the time.
Absolutely.
And so we had we had all this, and there were always those fears there. People in the DNC parlayed those fears into forcing out Joe Biden. And I think, in my humble opinion, in doing so, they've accidentally lost a presidential election they should be able to have easily won. And I would not let the hype, the pop culture of it all this type of thing fool you. This is the first week the Harris campaign has not in some way controlled the news narrative, either with the rollout, the nomination, rolling out Tim Walz. Every single week they've had a way to control the news narrative for a while, and the party is over. The calls for her to do a big interview are growing louder, and not just from Republicans. There's no sign of that anytime soon. There's no sign of her taking questions from reporters. The White House has quit having as many press briefings. Not sure what poor Karine Jean-Pierre is doing these days. Reading, I would imagine. Sort of thing. I mean, the lack of visibility and openness is starting to become conspicuous. And this is how it starts. This is how it starts with now you don't control the narrative. How is your campaign going to survive? What policies are you going to put out there? How are you going to criticize Trump? All this type of thing. Where are you campaigning? Where are you going? Where are you spending money? Are they going to try to make a play for Texas? Sort of thing. There's even a couple maps I've seen where Florida might be in play. I don't think that's real, but people like to say that. I'm like, I'm like, I still have PTSD from 2000 when Florida was much more of a back then. I think, it's, and especially because Joe Biden underperformed Hillary Clinton in South Florida by double digits. Hillary Clinton did fantastic in South Florida. Joe Biden did not even begin to meet her numbers. And this is the problem. Kamala Harris is inheriting a campaign infrastructure she did not build. I doubt she knows how to run. She's hired in a bunch of Obama people. Not a great move. They weren't great. They won 2 presidential elections, but as far as policy and implementation goes, they were a dumpster fire. All this sort of thing. It's a mess. And I feel like the pop culture hype and all the celebrity blah, blah, blah and everything has papered over what is an incredibly weak campaign on its back foot that has a lot of money that can still lose it all. Hillary Clinton in 2016. I mean, stop me when this starts to sound familiar. And that I really worry that the focus is going to be on the celebrity, the hype, all this type of thing, and not the reality that, even in her DNC nomination acceptance speech, there was a handful of policies, nothing really on the economy. She defends certain parts of Biden's record, but she hasn't really countered the argument against it, especially with, economic issues that we have, all this type of thing. The big dark specter of the election is still abortion. But I worry that there are swing state moderates who are going to be like, we don't really know her. What has she been doing? The Borders Are story is older but stuck and continues to stick and all this type of thing. And I think we're on the Democrat side in a lot more trouble than a lot of people know or understand, because things have happened so quickly. I mean, literally, all of this has happened in today. We're recording this is live on August the 27th. We're recording on August the 27th. All of this has happened in 2 months. From Biden's bad debate to today is 60 days. So it's been an eventful summer. And yeah, that's kind of where we're at. I'm worried about how this race is going to shape up, and we don't have a lot of time. We just have September, October, election. We've got, 70-ish days. It's tough times.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tough times. And I'm glad, I'm so, so very glad that your thoughts are in line with mine, because if you look at the media, the
Yeah.
control your narrative that's out there, oh, things have, she's winning in all these polls, and she's given the party such a boost of excitement. And in my head, I'm like, we didn't even know who she was 90 days ago.
Yeah.
I've said this on prior episodes, to be the first Black and of Asian descent vice president, you would have thought, especially with Joe was old when he got elected. I
Yeah.
initially thought the whole setup was, let's knight and train and mold Kamala. That's what I thought the plan was initially.
Biden's staff sidelined her in a big way. His chief
you
of
can
staff
tell.
doesn't particularly care for her. And so she got sidelined by the White House. Most people don't know that. And that's why she wasn't visible.
Yeah, and that comes back, I think, to bite, because, as you mentioned, there hasn't been an interview. The interviews that I have seen from older clips, obviously, depending on where you're looking at these clips, a lot of them have been edited to make her look bad. You have to make sure you're looking at the original source. But she's never really come off, to me, and this is just my personal opinion, as too likable. I think that shows in the when people forget, she already ran for president. She didn't come close to getting the nomination.
The 2020 campaign, her 2020 campaign never got off the ground. She didn't even make her own state's primary. California moved its primary so she could run for president, and her campaign didn't last that long.
Didn't last that long. So for me, I'm looking at, if it was an open option to get us a representative to go against Trump, for me, I'm looking at people like Gavin Newsom with a little bit more experience. I'm looking at people like Pete Buttigieg. I'm looking at a lot more people before we got Kamala. But, that loyalty, as you mentioned, Joe strategized. I think when it's all said and done, and I'm going off topic, when we look at these 4 years of Joe Biden, we're really going to be impressed with some of the maneuvering he did politically. And he united.
In terms of getting bipartisan legislation together, the Biden administration has been highly effective. In a way, the Obama administration was not, which tells me that David Plouffe was not listening to Joe Biden in the 8 years they were in office. Because Biden, in the top job, has gotten a lot of bipartisan legislation together that would have been a dream under the Obama years, sort of
Absolutely.
thing. And Biden's gotten the job done. The other problem, and I'm glad you kind of, brought it up, is the lack of familiarity, the lack of likability, all true, all big problems. I think the other sort of nagging problem with her, and I said this about, Hillary Clinton in 2016, who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton? Women.
Yeah.
Women did not come out for Hillary Clinton in the way that they were supposed to. And as my Nana put it, yes, because women know women and we don't like them.
Yeah.
And I think I very much worry Kamala Harris is going to suffer from the same problem. Also, she's a prosecutor. She's a lawyer. That's a certain personality type. She was very effective as that. I feel like she should have stayed in that world because the personality she has suits that very, very well.
Yeah. She'd be an amazing Supreme Court justice.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
amazing.
don't. And I think the other thing to remember that I think is kind of a bit weird when you talk about her visibility. Her and Joe have been running for president this whole time. When did we see her on the campaign trail? Lots of Joe. All the attention was on where was Biden going, what speech, what, all this type of thing. Supposedly she was on the stump, not that based on the reporting, social media clips, all this type of thing. And I mean, do I think maybe she might be got a little bit sidelined by the campaign because, again, they don't like her?
Right.
Which isn't an endorsement, by the way. That's not good. They're closest to her and don't like her. That's not great. Um, but it's like she has been running for vice president, and she's supposed. I mean, when you're the second on the ticket, you're supposed to be the chief surrogate for the person whose name is in front of you.
Absolutely.
Where is this woman? Where has this woman been? I mean, the only time we really got any, big, FaceTime with her was when she was going to debate JD Vance, sort of thing, before obviously everything changed. And so it is. I mean, I think she's really great, and I'll remind people she was my 2020 pick. I've thought
Yeah.
she would make a great president. I was an early supporter of her, like hashtag KHive. I was on board. However, she has, in a very short period of time, again, she never served a full term in the Senate. She was only there for about 3.5 years. She has jumped from Senate to vice president, and now all of a sudden she is running for president again, in a very, very short period of time. And I just worry even if she does win, we're gonna end up with Obama. Really great
Lights
opportunity.
up.
Nothing gets done,
Right.
potentially for years. And so I think if they're gonna turn this around, they've got to come out swinging with a very defined set of policy proposals that builds on the parts of Joe Biden's legacy that resonate with voters, which is not Bidenomics, by the way. Don't talk about the economy. Stay off the economy. It's not good
Ab-
out here. Don't say a word about the
ab-
economy. Talk about everything else. And also, and talk foreign policy, talk about the chaotic world, just don't mention the economy. Those things. I mean, they need to roll out a series and also contrast yourself with Joe Biden in some areas.
sure.
And perhaps the economy is an area where that's probably the one time to talk about the economy is to then contrast yourself with Bidenomics. And she stepped into that a little bit with supporting unions, wanting more unions, all this type of thing. But that was a Joe thing. So they've really, I think, now in this time, they've really got to start rolling out the substance. We've had the hype, we've had the fun, we've had the celebrities, we've had the huge party, all this type of thing, and now you've got to really show substance. Otherwise, people are going to wonder, is there any substance there?
Absolutely. And now that we've had, Megan twerk for freedom and Little John say yeah for freedom,
Yeah.
which, that's a whole nother episode that I'd rather not get into at this current time. You touched on economics because with me and everybody I talk to, that's number one. And Bidenomics has not, regardless if he inherited this economy, people don't look at it. They look at when I was doing well. And I've heard a lot of people, obviously, that are ill informed, but a lot of people say, Uncle Donnie gave me a $1,200 stimmy. Under Uncle Donnie, I could still buy a Big Mac for less than $10. I, the average Joe, I believe there's a percentage of the population, no matter what that particular candidate does, they're going to vote for him. There's also a percentage of the population that are going to vote along party lines. We're looking at the swing states. We're looking at the youth, which rarely get excited and rarely come out and force minorities to be that small percentage that gets people over the hump. We haven't heard anything from Kamala as far as economics. The one thing she mentioned is something that she stole from Donald Trump. Like, oh yeah, we want to stop taxing tips as well. And I'm like, oh God, when you're cheating off of Donald Trump's test, that's a little scary. How do
And
you
it's bad
see
policy anyway,
bad policy? How do you see this election's outcome affecting the U.S. economy, both in short term and in long term? And are there any like specific sectors or industries that stand to gain or lose depending on who wins this election?
Yeah, well, if you're an oil company, you really want Trump to win. Trump has already adopted the drill baby drill policy. He's going to open up federal land. He wants to, pump out every dollop of oil we can find in this country, which is funny because we don't need more oil pumping. We are energy independent and we export the world's most amount of oil. We export more than Saudi Arabia, which pisses off Saudi Arabia because they can't fix the price of oil to their preference anymore. And also it means we're no longer particularly beholden to them. However, what we do need is refining capacity. This is an area where Joe Biden let California close its last oil refinery, which was not good. And we have not built a new oil refinery since 1973. That's a problem.
Huge problem.
Huge problem. It's not more oil. We need more ways to refine it. And we also need to be able to refine different types of oil so that when we import, we can refine. We need to learn how to refine dirtier oil. Oil in North America is fairly clean. It's called light sweet. And it's very easy to refine because there's not a lot of other stuff in it. Heavier, dirtier oil, which is what most of the world has, takes a lot more to refine because you have to purify it more. We need refineries that are flexible and can take a wide variety of types of oil so that we can expand our refining capacity. No one's having that conversation, of course. But if you're an oil company, you want Trump to win because you're gonna be fine. I think a lot of people think that that Donald Trump was responsible for the low prices and Joe Biden was responsible for high prices. That is not true at all. We spent too much money on the pandemic. Now, Trump spent a lot of money on the pandemic and sent out stimulus checks and did PPP and all this type of thing. And then Joe Biden, not to be outdone, spent the same amount in 6 months that Trump had done over a year. And so all in all, we spent I think it's almost $2 trillion on the pandemic, including vaccine and vaccine rollout and education and and Jerome Powell said this very early on. We have demand side inflation, which is very hard to fix with monetary policy tools like interest rates. And I think also people need to get used to the fact that while the rate of inflation has slowed, the cost of living has gone up 22% in the last basically since 2022, in the last two and a half years. These new prices are here and here to stay. They're not going anywhere. We have too much currency chasing too few goods. We also have a global situation that has caused the prices of things to increase. We're also decoupling from China. The age of cheap goods from China is over, everyone. We're going back to the way things used to be in the 80s, when things cost a little bit more and you bought less of it. My mom has a box fan from Montgomery Ward that was the old fan when I was a child. It's so old it was made in Ohio. Incidentally, still works though. So there's that. And a lot of the economy for the last 25, 30 years was predicated on we're not going to get a huge amount of wage growth, but we are going to have cheap goods. That was Alan Greenspan's whole strategy. That was the plan, starting in the 80s, coming out of the Volcker rule and how they had to break the stagflation in the late 70s. That was the thing. That's over. It's done. Regardless of who wins, that's over. These high prices are here and here to stay. Now, here's what we can mitigate, and here's where, if I were the Harris campaign, here's the stuff I would start talking about. Housing. Now, she's talked about, we need to build 3 million houses. That's a great tagline. How are you going to do it? Who's going to pay?
Who can afford it? Who's going to buy it?
Cost? Yeah, where are we going to build these houses? And by the way, it's local cities that control the regulations on zoning and all this type of thing. The federal government has absolutely no power in all of that. How are you going to convince San Francisco to get rid of height requirements? How are you going to convince local cities to get rid of parking requirements, the things that would be necessary to make this stuff happen? How are you going to convince people in neighborhoods like in Denver? They closed a golf course, wanted to put in housing. It got voted down. It's 50 feet from a transit stop. It's the perfect place housing should go, and it's not being built. These are local problems.
Right.
So you could end up with a situation where Harris wins, they get the funding to build the 3 million houses, and then they end up getting built nowhere useful because no city wants that, that new increase or that new development or it gets caught up in planning and approvals for years and years and years. And by that time we're still behind. So when it comes to the cost and price of housing, you need to provide some incentives for local and state officials to open up the taps on land, on zoning, all this type of thing. You need to not listen to urbanist Twitter and try to make it all walkable, bikeable, all this type of thing. If some city wants to build 5,000 houses of suburban sprawl, let them. Because the housing crisis is such. Those are the things that you could actively help on. I think her coming out on wanting to go after grocery store prices and quote unquote price gouging is a nice idea. The reality is grocery stores don't actually make that much money. The margin in grocery is terrible, by the way.
Right.
And I know smaller, local grocery, all this type of thing. It's a lot of work to make money in grocery. People are very price sensitive, and there's always somebody out there with a sale willing to offer it for less. The competition is tremendous, and that keeps prices down. And so I think that was a nice idea, but again, not well thought out, not well planned, because as everyone pointed out, the margin on grocery is terrible. A lot of grocery companies don't actually make that much money off food. They make it on selling their data, or they make it on advertising because they sell shelf placement to brands. That's where they actually make money. The actual product on the shelf is not a tremendous mover of money. And so I think that's, that sort of thing is a nice idea, but it's not well thought out. And I think the trouble is, and I think this is the Biden administration into this, and so did Kamala Harris on the economy. There's too much money chasing too few goods and services. And the government can't really do anything about that other than start pulling money out of the economy, which is deflation. And ironically, as much as we all don't like inflation, deflation is worse.
True.
Especially if you owe money on cars, houses, credit cards, all this type of thing, because you're paying back higher amounts of money with money that's worth more but goes less far. So it is a very difficult thing. But I think, child tax care credit stuff is good. Things like that for working families is good. I honestly think she should go look at some of the things she proposed in 2020 and look back at a couple of those and see if any of that's still relevant now. I think that, because that she had more stuff sort of filled out back then, and I think it would not be a bad idea to kind of look over the shoulder a little bit and look at, what from then might still be relevant now.
Absolutely. Now, since the last time we spoke, we now have our vice presidents. We know who is going to be VP on each side. We've also had somebody drop out of the race, and you and I talked about this offline. Mr. Kennedy, Mr. R. Kennedy, he has called it quits, gracefully bowed out. He's come out and endorsed Donald Trump, which, if you listen to the Republicans, it's John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan joining forces to make this huge bipartisan love fest out of nowhere. When in reality, nobody really likes RFK.
No,
I don't really see the big deal. Do you see those few percentage points coming on over from RFK and actually impacting Trump positively, or is it Harris's race to lose?
I think right now it's really neither of theirs race to lose. So when you look, I was looking at New York Times aggregate polling data. A lot of Harris's new support, and she's gone up 7 points since the last day Joe Biden was a candidate in this race. I mean, the polling was not good in June. I mean, really and truly, the polling was not great. And I wasn't terribly worried. We still had the whole summer campaign season to go through, but the polling was not great. And before, on the last day that Joe Biden was in the race, RFK was doing 10-11%. Not bad for a third party candidate. Ross Perot wishes.
Not bad at all.
And so, but when Harris enters the race, you look at polls in the weeks afterwards, RFK's support collapses from 10 down to 3 or 4 in some polls. Now, a couple points of that went to Trump. About 5 points of it, interestingly, went to Kamala Harris. I think, now here's where Harris has an advantage, and this I will give her. There was a very big group in this country called the double haters, people who wanted neither Biden nor Trump, and a lot of people that were like, please God, anyone else but these two. The advantage Kamala Harris has is being a new face. She is not Biden. She is not Trump. And as she's not been visible, she's just, oh my God, somebody else, someone with other ideas. And I think there is a bit of, not a, I would say a groundswell, but a healthy amount of support that said, oh my goodness, one of the parties found somebody else. Great, we can leave this guy. Thanks, but bye. And kind of rush over to Harris. A couple people went over to Trump, but part of the reason he's dropping out is because he went from having a 10 to 11% campaign to a campaign in the single digits. His campaign support, what little of it there was, collapsed in 3 weeks, and about half of it was due to Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And about 3 to 4, depending on which poll you read, ended over in the Trump camp, to where now we're right now in the race. We're about Kamala Harris +2. Now, it's a tremendous change because overall, from Joe Biden, she's +7. But the reality is that Trump is still holding right there, at a strong 45, 46%, depending on the day and all this type of thing, and depending on if there's a particularly conservative poll that just came out that moves the aggregation numbers around, sort of. It's not the runaway panacea that people on social media would like you to think it is. I know from today's latest news that him and Tulsi Gabbard are going to be joining the Trump campaign and are apparently have been promised cabinet positions, and they're now going to be involved and all this type of thing. I'm not surprised, given the parade of Republicans the DNC hauled out on endorsing Harris over Trump, including former Trump officials. So the Trump campaign is going to look for anybody they can grab, on their side who's going to be interested in them and all this sort of thing. Don't count Trump out. We made this mistake before, 8 years ago.
Absolutely.
No one took it, all this type of thing. And I see it happening again already. I have too many liberal blue voting friends who act like this is now a done deal, done and dusted. It's going to be an easy sail to the White House. And I'm over here saying, we haven't even talked about the complete legal shit show that's going to happen after this election. That's actually already starting in some places like Georgia, who basically, if Harris wins Georgia, they're not going to certify her election, and it's going to go to court. That's what's waiting for us the day after the election.
That is literally my next question.
Yeah, even before then, even before we get into all of that, this race is not done. She's got a slim 2-point margin, and she hasn't campaigned a day where she has not controlled the news narrative. She has never been on the back foot. She's never had to really counter a Trump attack. She is, her lack of presence in media is becoming conspicuous. This is not done and dusted. And people are very unhappy when I say that, but I'm like, this is presidential politics. She needs to book in with a big, serious interviewer soon. Now, they're going to try to, I think, drag it out because Trump wants to pull out of the September 10th debate. And so they're going to try to play that whole card. But America needs to get to know her. The DNC acceptance speech was the first time we'd really ever heard her speak in a sustained way for an hour on a variety of topics.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. She didn't make it that far in the platform before.
Yeah, I mean, in the whole time she's been in public life, that was the longest we have ever heard her speak, in public, ever, to 28 million people on national television. She needs to, book in with somebody serious on a network, and have a very real and particular conversation on a wide variety of topics and address the economy, the border, immigration is a big topic this election, second only to abortion. And though, I mean, that needs to happen, very, very quickly. You wanted to ask about after the election.
Yes, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. We need to see her on something because Trump is on everything. I've seen him on Twitch. I've seen him on Theo Von sitting down with comedians.
He did a live with Elon Musk that was viewed by 200 million people.
The Elon Musk, where I never heard somebody say yes more than Elon Musk. He was like, yes. But he is really
Trump owns the plantation and Elon was the butler.
Oh man, he was definitely Motisa. I was like, who's got more money here? But right. I really noticed Trump. I even watched a couple of those interviews, particularly the Theo Von one, and he came off very human. Which
the Theo Von interview was very interesting and different. Like that was I'm kind of like, oh my god, Trump's almost a person. Weird.
I almost looked behind the veneer and the orange paint and the toupee, and I said, "There's a person under there who has experienced some things." I thought it came off favorable for Trump, and we haven't seen anything like that from Kamala. So I'm glad. I mean,
honestly, Kamala Harris. I mean, just like Trump is doing. She needs to call every liberal podcast, link in bio, every major liberal podcast, and yeah, you need to do 15 minutes with Rachel Maddow. I mean, like sit her in a room, in a hotel room with a camera and just do Good Morning America if you have to. Like, I mean, book a frittata on the Today Show. I mean, out there like that, and every major liberal podcast, Mark Levin, David Pakman, the Young Turks, play a game with Hassan Piker on Twitch if you must. Also come on the Cameron Journal podcast, but sort of thing. But it's like, I mean, all of those things, like you need to run the gamut, and because Kamala Harris is not going on the liberal version of Theo Von. Kamala Harris wouldn't even go on Theo Von, sort of thing.
Right.
And if she really wants to overturn this election, go on Joe Rogan. That would be a very interesting 2 hours.
Earth-shattering.
Yeah, I mean, go on Club Shay if you have to.
No, because he's gonna have Club Shay. I think he put something in the cognac because people start telling too much truth. I could see it's like, yeah, when me and Montel Williams, we used to have swingers. Like, oh no,
that'd be hilarious though.
She used to date Montel Williams. Maybe she could do an interview with him. Anyway,
but that's not. But it's like, I mean, wherever you can be. Anyone who will take a booking, like you need to be on there, out there, making it happen. And Waltz too. Yeah, like I need, Waltz visiting a football team in Oakland, where black people are playing, sort of thing. Like, I need him throwing a football to some 17-year-old quarterback whose mother is homeless and who lives in her car. Some nice, good feel-good story. It's like, this is what you should be doing, sort of thing. And
that's what I want to see.
And that stuff for especially a lot of on-the-fence voters. That's the stuff that, for better or for worse, moves polling numbers.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And I feel like, and I feel like she's very good in a very defined, controlled environment.
Yes.
She needs to prove she can exist outside of that container. Because this is also an indication of what type of White House she would run. Do we want to go back to the Trump years when we begged the press briefing room had dust when the Biden administration arrived, because Trump basically quit bothering to deal with that stuff? I mean, they had to dust because it was, do we want to go back to that? Do we want to go back to an age where everything coming out of the White House is meticulously packaged? And if they can't package it in a way that favors them, they're just not going to address it? Because that's how they're running their campaign right now.
Absolutely. I think there's some cracks and flaws.
That's not the type of leadership I think the country is looking for.
No. It's one thing about Joe. It doesn't matter if he stuttered. Doesn't matter if he got on the wrong plane. He's going to give you Joe, and he's going to give you a human being underneath that instead of just a politician. You felt President Biden. With Kamala, she hasn't given me the warm and fuzzies yet, and it's so close and so dangerously close that she, as you mentioned, she needs to put that thing in gear and go in overdrive. And really, she needs to be on the Cameron Cowan podcast. She needs a couple of politics as usual, Joe Rogan, Breakfast Club, anything she can get.
Yeah,
We need to see that.
I mean, all the late night shows, all this type of thing. I mean, anywhere, literally anyone that will take a booking, like anywhere, go and be there, and Hall Waltz out there too, and to absolutely go all the places. I mean, that's the type of stuff that is. I mean, even just because it would make the Trump world explode. There's a dozen drag queens that all have podcasts. Hit up a couple. Even if you have to phone it in from somewhere else. Even if you're having to do, a video conference from the plane. Do it. Because we need to get to know her very quickly, get very comfortable with her very quickly. And we also need to see her with a little bit more spontaneity. And it's funny that she's afraid of doing it, because in the spontaneous moments we've seen, those are some of the most delightful, like the infamous turkey recipe, which she gave 58 seconds in between, TV interviews in the Midwest. So I mean, some of that it can be good. She can be good. She did a cooking a curry with Mindy Kaling one time during the pandemic.
I saw that.
Can do it. She can do it. I worry that they're hesitating right now, and in that hesitation, it's gonna cause a problem.
Yeah, he who hesitates in war is lost, and this is most definitely war and nothing less. Now,
a lot of these, and given the legal situation we're facing in Georgia, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Arizona, and the fact that she could win the popular vote of that state and still not get the electors because the GOP has spent the last 4 years rigging the system to make sure they don't lose anymore, and it's all going to be in court. You need to win these places. You need to win by a large margin. She needs to not shoot for 270. She needs to shoot for 300. I mean, it needs to be so overwhelming that Trump looks stupid as he drags it out in court, because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's my biggest fear. And I think you just acknowledged my mother and father are both huge when it comes to politics. Every time I go visit them, they have CNN and something, Al Sharpton on the screen, Rachel Maddow, just sucking it all in nonstop. Yeah. And my dad's biggest fear, and he mentioned it, Trump has even said it, he said, just vote this time and we'll have it so red that you'll never have to do it again. Those electoral challenges, given the controversy surrounding, when you look at previous elections, do we really anticipate, any legal or electoral challenges during the cycle, and how might it affect the outcome? Because my biggest fear is, like you said, she wins, and then they just say, no, we're not going to ratify these votes. No. And we're sitting in court for the next, however many days. How big of a reality is that for us?
It is going to happen somewhere. It could happen in Arizona. It could happen in Georgia. It could happen in Pennsylvania. Now, in some case, it also could happen if she happens to win in a state where she is not supposed to win, like North Carolina is now in play, which has no Democrat has touched since Obama. Also, if the numbers in Florida are real, which I don't think they are, but if Florida actually ends up being close, I still have PTSD from 2000. We could end up with another problem. Yes, I mean, if Florida is close and we're recounting Broward County, which is just another nightmare scenario, yeah, you could start to end up with election board, because this is what the GOP has done. They've installed people in election boards, county clerks, secretaries of state, all the way up the line, so 2020 could never happen ever again. And so, yeah, if you end up with a state that's super close and is stuck in recount land and all this type of thing, you could end up having legal challenges that stop the process, halt the process, or they simply refuse to certify until it's Trump. And so you could end up with a situation, and I think this is likely, where Kamala Harris won the popular vote of a state, they don't certify it, they change to Trump, or the state legislature, Michigan, convenes and decides to change the slate of electors. So there's going to be a concerted legislative, bureaucratic, and legal effort to stop her from winning. That's why the win's got to be overwhelming. You can't just go for 270. You've got to go for 300 plus. You got to assume you're going to lose a couple. You got to assume maybe Arizona's not going to certify. You got to assume maybe Georgia's not going to certify. And that's why it wouldn't be a bad idea to spend some money in Texas, but you also have to deal with the reality Texas may not certify. You may actually turn Texas blue. You may get 40 electoral votes. First win of Texas since LBJ. And you may end up in a scenario and situation where they just don't certify. And you may end up in multiple legal battles in multiple states. This is such a huge problem. The DOJ has already put legal teams in all 50 states to deal with the legal challenges coming out of that will come out of this election, because this election will ultimately be decided in courts, multiple courts nationwide, because Trump's whole strategy, if he doesn't win outright on the first night, is going to be to challenge every result everywhere, to try to activate these ghost laws they put in place, to make sure that they start to end up in power. And the reality is Trump is right. We already know from Project 2025, and all this type of thing, what's going to happen. Trump's going to get into office. They have their whole agenda planned out. They know exactly what they want to do. They're dangerous now because they actually know how the government works. And he said this in interviews. He knows how it all works now. He knows what to do and how to get it done. There's not going to be any guardrails. There's not going to be any adults in the room. There's not going to be anything. They are going to radically change life in this country very quickly. And I think what frightens me the most, and I have someone who is sort of not a supporter of Trump the person, but Trumpism as an ideology, which will not go away for a generation, is how very comfortable Trump supporters are with that.
Yeah, they're extremely comfortable.
That's what I think is the most frightening, is they're very okay with that. They're very okay with living under authoritarianism. They're very okay with Trump being a pseudo dictator that, barely answers to anyone, much less legislature, which is, there's a lot of countries like that. Russia's very much like that. The Duma is decorative in Russia. Putin runs everything. China's the same situation. There are other places where you have a legislature, but what do they really do, sort of thing. This is our Julius Caesar moment. This is our crossing the Rubicon moment. If they get the reins of power again, democracy as we've known it in this country will be over, and your vote really will mean nothing, because it will be Trump, GOP, Republican rule, his loyalists, his people, until he dies. And then after he dies, it will be someone else. And there's already people vying for the job. Look at you, Mike Johnson, J.D. Vance, a whole host of characters. It'll be the same thing. And they will structurally put the system together to where they will never lose. And then it won't matter what the Democrats do, because it will be structurally such that they'll always win. And you're also going to start looking at the federal government undermining, blue state policy, all this type of thing. So even living in a blue state's not going to really make you safe from a lot of this stuff. And especially what they'll do economically with cutting taxes and all this sort of thing, environmental devastation, what will happen, overseas and all this type of thing is also quite devastating. I laugh that one of the big things the Trump supporters say is, we had 4 years and no new wars. Don't you care about that? I'm kind of like, we didn't start any of these present wars.
Right.
It's not like, if Putin had called Biden and said, hey, do you mind if I annex Ukraine? They would have been like, no, don't do that, sort of thing. No one asked Hamas to start terrorizing Israeli civilians on October 7th and causing that to flare up. We've already had to bring Xi Jinping to heel, which Biden has done handily well. It's like, yeah, okay, so you're right. Trump didn't invade anywhere, but I'm amazed at the people that are kind of like, there's all this war, all this conflict. We didn't have this under Trump. Yeah, because Hamas was still building little planes and flyers to attack people. They were learning how to weld on YouTube, sort of thing.
Takes a
I'm
long time to get your ITT Tech certification.
Exactly. Like, I don't know why Putin chose the moment to invade Ukraine that he did, but clearly he had some preparations in mind. I know he wanted to secure Russia's economy. He was buying gold like a fiend. I imagine that calculated very heavily into when he decided to pursue that because he knew what the West would do sanctions wise. So, yeah, that's not really a defensible argument. Yes, Trump benefited from a somewhat stable world order brought on by us bringing the war on terror to a close. Yay. Okay, good for him. They didn't really do anything under the Trump administration to make that happen. He was writing love letters to Kim Jong-un. That was his foreign policy. He loves me not. That was the Trump foreign policy. And so it is frightening how very okay with Trump supporters are with that, just because. And also, Trump benefited from 3 years without a pandemic. People forget that the pandemic happened at the end of his time in office. Joe Biden didn't have a year without the pandemic till the mid part of 2023. The first 2 years were all pandemic all the time, and the economic and social upheaval that came with that. And that's not an excuse for the lackluster performance of the Biden administration. That's just a reality. Yeah, of course the Trump years were better. Things were nice in 2017. That was a long time ago. In 2018.
Right.
Yeah, that was a pandemic and a lot of social and cultural change ago. It's not really a fair comparison, but that's what people are doing in their heads. To your original point at the top of the show, of people saying, well, life was better under Trump, things were cheaper, all this type of thing. Well, yeah, we also had global supply chain networks. We didn't have a pandemic, and we weren't decoupling from China. A lot changes in 8 years.
Absolutely.
Sorry, everyone. And it's not like I haven't suffered from this too. Like, I'm a small business owner. I work for myself. You want to think inflation hasn't affected me? I just paid $1,200 for brakes the other day. That I used to be able to get for under $1,000. I'm reminded every time I go to the gas pump. It's $3.81 here in Wilmington, Delaware today. That's the price of gas today. I haven't seen gas under $3 in years. Like, I'm very well aware, yeah, life was better back then, but let's not pretend that Trump was the reason for that. Trump inherited a phenomenal economy coming out of the Obama years and didn't have a pandemic for 3 years.
Yeah. The world before the pandemic is something we'll tell our grandkids about, but it's not a reality anymore, and it never will be. We're in a new world order, no pun intended. So we're literally in a new world order, and we have to adapt to that.
A multipolar global environment that is forcing us to rethink where we source goods and services from. We've had a tremendous amount of immigration in the last couple of years, and not just us. Europe's had it too. It's been elsewhere as well. Things are moving and shifting. We're starting to see the beginnings of the climate crisis. In pre-production, we were joking about selling house insurance policies in Florida, which is no longer a thing. There's a lot. You have to remember, it has been 8 years since 2016. And a lot has happened in that time. And we're starting to see, the beginnings of all of that. In fact, even I laugh because my next edition of my book, What the Hell is Going On, is coming out, and some of those essays date from 2014, and we now call that the OG. We call those the OG essays because they're 10 years old. That's the time I've been in this business. How much has changed, since I first even started doing this aspect of the business. Things have changed. Times changed. We're in a whole new world. I think we really have to, and this is the part I think where people struggle, is we have to really adjust our expectations. Because you're right, that world's not coming back. It can't. The structures that made it possible don't exist anymore.
Literally, it's a brand new world, and the same place that I've lived in since 2018, those first few years until last year, my rent was the same. And I don't live in a rent controlled environment. My rent was the same. And over the last 2 years, it's gone up 40% in 2 years
Yeah.
after years of no changes. I wasn't impacted by the pandemic. I still paid my rent. A lot of people got tax write-offs or certain things where they didn't have to pay their rent. Or no, I
Yeah.
paid my rent every single month during the pandemic because I was blessed to still be able to have a job as well as run my small business. So it didn't necessarily impact me. But there's so many people, so many of my friends that careers don't exist anymore. They've had to do complete 180s on what they were doing as a career because they just, if they owned a bar, the bar didn't make it out of the pandemic. If they owned a restaurant, that restaurant didn't, and that was their whole life. And then on top of technology, so many experts are saying, by 2031, the 9 to 5 doesn't exist anymore, and everybody's doing gig-based economy. So we're in the cusp of something new, exciting, scary. But I do feel this election is going to be, do we come out of this A-OK, or do we all start to get our passport and we become immigrants and we start heading over to wherever accept us? Because
I know
that's
with
the
those
kind
rent
of thing.
raises, we're gonna have to start a podcast house or something. I don't know. Just get all of us
We,
together just to
we,
split
we, we
bills.
might have
Um,
to. Everybody just split bills, but we'll all be 35 and up. And won't be so interesting. Yeah, we're recording everything. Mars takes a nap every day at 6:30. It's not the most interesting
right. It's
place.
like enjoy Cameron reading pre-Islamic Arabic philosophy in the den. Like we don't really do pranks and things here. We have
Don't
bad
do
knees, so
that.
this can afford to fall. Like, you know.
I have plantar fasciitis. If I stretch my foot, it's over. I'm yeah. I think people
Right?
would tune in. That
It's
will
like it's like if you want something exciting, Cal Jones is streaming sports stuff in the next channel over. Like that's, you
he's
know?
had he's had 3 shots because that's all he can handle anymore. He's slowly napping as college football. So we'll do that.
Exactly,
Let
exactly.
us
It'll be fun
let us know.
times.
We'll rent us a nice Airbnb. Put everybody together, film content. It could work.
Oh, yeah, no, that would be it. That would be entertaining. Um,
I would definitely check that
but no,
out.
I mean, but you're absolutely right. Things and times have changed, and I would say if you're watching this show or listening to us and you're voting for Trump because your life was better in 2019, I hear you. You're valid, but I have bad news, friend. The world of 2019 is not coming back. That world is gone. And believe me, I've had to personally myself emotionally adjust to that and what it's done to my business, to my personal life, everything, like, and how, I'm having to figure out new things and new ways of moving in the world myself. I feel and I don't have a consistent W-2 employer job. Like, I do this full time. This is how I make my money, all this type of thing. Yeah, it's not fun. It's not great. I'm still figuring stuff out, all this sort of thing. But the reality is you can vote for Trump, but he's not going to be able to bring you 2019 back. It's not going to happen. A lot of the changes we're talking about are going to happen regardless of who wins in November. It's just how we're going to
Absolutely.
react to it. And here's the important part. How much support do you want as AI starts to clean out certain jobs? I had a guy on the show a couple weeks ago. I'm doing a brand partnership with him, actually, named Stephen Fair. He has an AI that takes podcast transcripts, turns them into articles. Very exciting stuff. And he came on the show initially to say, and he said flat out, employment is going to be done in 2 years.
I
And I'm
believe it.
kind of like, I'm sorry, what? He's like, yeah, between AI and how dexterous robots are getting coming out of Tesla and elsewhere, employment is going to be, he's like, we need to start having conversations about universal basic income and what people are going to do to have meaning and purpose now. Because this is it. He's like, it's not coming, it's here. This
It's
is
here.
happening.
It's here.
Now,
The cat's out the bag.
right now, I think under a Harris administration, you're going to get some sympathy, some empathy, and some support as we go through whatever's going to happen in the next decade. Trump is not going to lift a finger for you. He's not going to care.
Every man, woman, and child for himself. And you heard him. If you listen to his interview with Elon Musk, right at the start, he says, "Oh, I love how you came right in and just cut your workflow by 90%. And I love that. Just get them out there." And then Elon Musk is like, "Yes, efficiency." That is one side. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I was doing for my 9-to-5 hustle. I was doing continuing education that I have to do in my industry every 2 years. I have to continue to take these classes. And literally, I had my chat GPT on my phone, and I would just type in the question, and it gave me the answer. So if that, which on the iOS 18 update, chat GPT will be included in the phone, the more people that have it, the more intelligent the AI becomes. That's how it works. Mm-hmm. It's no reason you can't do an app to do most 9-to-5 jobs. Because it knows the laws, it knows the rules, it knows the regulations. You just plug it in. The AI could literally take a claim over the phone, listen to the facts, make the liability decision, pay out the claim automatically. That's a whole industry shut down.
No, I mean, I was doing a product demonstration with Stefan on analyzing a podcast episode and turning it into an article. And it is so fast. It will take we've been live for an hour and 6 minutes. It can make an article out of this in 90 seconds.
That's amazing.
It can produce 500 new article ideas in 90 seconds and then email them to you in an Excel sheet for your use, categorized, no less. It's tremendous. And that doesn't even get into Amazon is already implementing human-like robots in their warehouse working alongside humans that can pack boxes, shuffle boxes, all this type of thing. It doesn't even get into other physical robots that, as one person said, and by the way, this is the worst they'll ever be. It only goes up from here, sort of thing. The level, I don't think we are ready for the level of automation that AI is bringing us, how many people are going to be displaced by it, and how much fewer people we're going to need to do certain jobs. And we've seen this story play out before. It's how the personal computer killed the typing pool. The Xerox machine killed carbon copy typing. I mean, all this stuff where, a business, a law office of 3 lawyers would have had 3 or 4 secretaries. Nowadays, you need, one very nice lady in her late 40s with a Stanley Cup can run everything with the computer. That's what's coming, is that we're getting to a place where, the day is quickly coming where there will be a startup that uses AI that gets significant market cap with a team that's less than 10. Bearing in mind, Instagram, when it sold, only had 13 people working there.
Yeah.
So you could potentially, in the not too distant future, have a company IPO and go public with a team of less than 10 because AI is doing the bulk of the work, especially tedious things like compliance and all this type of thing that nobody really wants to do that stuff anyway. This stuff is coming. I mean, the photos are getting more realistic. The video is getting more fantastic. The text is getting better and better. Being able to create agents to do certain tests. This is coming. And so a lot of it's already here. It's just getting the adoption rates up. And so I think, under the Trump administration, they'll let her rip as far as letting it go into the marketplace and letting Elon do it every once in a while, all this type of thing. And that's great if you own Tesla or Twitter and SpaceX and all. I mean, that's great if you're the 1% who owns a lot of this stuff. If you're a common everyday worker, which is probably who's listening to this show. I mean, if you are part of the 1% listening, thank you for coming. But for everyone else, the Trump administration is not going to lift a finger to help you. I mean, it's going to take people living in Hoovervilles, we'll call them Trumpvilles, living in Hoovervilles before Trump will look outside long enough to realize, there seems to be a lot of tents on the National Mall these days. What's going on with that? Before he even acknowledges the problem. And because of the lack of accountability, what incentive is he going to have to do anything about it? I mean, things, and I don't think people underestimate how really bad things can get before authoritarian regimes really decide to do anything.
Right.
You think America's collapsing now? You think we're living in late stage capitalism now? Wait till the social security checks stop coming, the mail stops getting delivered, your house burns down because there's no fire department, you're getting mugged because there's no police department. Things can get a lot worse. And I think given what's happening technologically and economically and what the Trump administration won't do about it, that I think is a huge fear. At least the Harris administration will try to do something. They'll at least care. And
some level of compassion, some level.
Yeah, they will at least attempt to do something about the problem. They will at least care that it's happening. We have no proof that Trump will care. If anything, he'll encourage the displacement. And a lot of us have been through you went to college, you should have gone into the trades. Oh, you went into the humanities, you should learn how to code. Oh, then tech started laying off happened. Oh, you should have gone into the trades. You should start doing tangible things. AI is going to get rid of all the digital stuff, so people actually have to go back to building stuff. We don't need 100,000 people to build a Chevy anymore. That world has been gone for 40 years. Robots do that now. It's like, and not everybody can go into home construction because you know what that'll do? It'll drive down wages. And then people will be getting paid $6 an hour to hang drywall,
Right.
And there's already a lot of immigrants in that, so the immigrants will undercut. You will be paying $1 for the drywall. So this is not a sustainable economic plan, sort of thing. And that massive displacement will have a lot of social upheaval. To me, that's the thing about Trump that I think is the most frightening is change is a coming globally, domestically, and the Trump administration isn't going to really do anything about it. At least Harris will try. And I think that's what we have to hold out for.
And I hate to, we go from running a campaign on Make America Great Again or hope to at least Harris will try. And at the end of the day, that might be all we could ask for at this point. Cam, I thank you so much. Again, that is the soundbite of the episode. At least Harris will try. I think that's what we need to hold on to and hope on to. Please get out there and vote. Vote for democracy. Vote for a future. Vote for reality. Our only chance at this point, because we are at a crossroads as a country and a crossroads as a planet. So, Cam, I thank you again. I could talk to you all day and all night, but I know you have to get back to hustling. Please, one more time, let people know exactly where they can find some of your enlightenment and some of your fantastic information.
Yeah, so Instagram, X, LinkedIn is at Cameron Cowan. TikTok is at Cameron Journal. If you want to go find all the links, it's CameronJournal.com. Follow me everywhere, including YouTube. Is a lot of fun. I have new interviews out with interesting people every week. And if there is a presidential debate on September 10th, I will be live streaming it. I don't do a ton of lives anymore because I've been very busy writing books and kind of tired and exhausted. So I haven't been doing the weekly news show for a while. But I do lives for special events. I did the State of the Union. I did the debate in June. So if there's one in September, we'll do that then. But follow me on YouTube and you'll be notified. And we'll go from there. And like I said, if you love a Discord, come on over to the Cameron Journal Discord because we're trying to get that off the ground. So, and all links are at CameronJournal.com. So thank you, Mars. I appreciate it.
Of course. Cam, thank you so much. Please do yourself a favor and go ahead and subscribe to the Discord. Make sure you follow all of his products. They will keep you in the how. Breaks down just like he broke it down for us tonight, as he always does. Guys, I thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you get out there. If you haven't registered to vote already, make sure you have. Get out there and vote like your life depends on it, because guess what? It does depend on it. And also, we have a brief word for our sponsor. The sponsor of this episode, brand new album, John E. Raps Bats, comes out tonight, midnight, August 28th at midnight. Go ahead and stream that everywhere. If you like hip hop, it's a great album. Thank you so much, Mr. Raps, for your sponsorship. And guys, you know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe. And make sure you turn your notification on so when these specials drop, you'll be the first to have an opportunity to look at it. For Cameron Cohen, for myself, Mars, we thank you for so much for tuning in to a brand new stellar episode of Politicking as Usual, where we cover the political spectrum from A to Z. You know what to do. Get out there and vote. Your life depends on it. We're out of here.